They told me on a Tuesday. The timing was strategic. Tuesdays are quiet, no weekend tension, no Friday panic, just a smooth, forgettable middle. The email said, Departmental Alignment Discussion, 9 a.m., HR Conf Room C. I'd been at the company 22 years. I knew what that kind of title meant. I didn't reply, I just showed up. Room C was already booked, chairs arranged into a semicircle, like a career intervention. There was coffee, too hot, too intentional. Susan Trammell, director of HR, smiled like someone rehearsing empathy in a mirror. Elaine, she said, thank you for coming in early. We wanted to have this conversation in a space where we could really align around the future of the department. Beside her sat Matt Carson, the new CFO, 6 months into the job, high-speed, MBA certified, and already famous for replacing 2 department heads in his first 90 days. To his right was a third chair. It wasn't empty. She stood when I walked in. 25, maybe 26. Brown blazer, notebook in hand, posture perfect, nervous but trying to hide it. Susan gestured between us. This is Jenna Lee. She's going to be joining as a senior analyst to help bridge some of the operational workflows we've been evolving. You'll be working closely with her over the next few weeks to ensure a full knowledge transfer. Matt added, we see this as an opportunity for mentorship. Your institutional knowledge is invaluable to this transition. I nodded. Once. No protest, no raised eyebrow, no sharp intake of breath. They called it mentorship. I knew it was a handoff. My title would be dissolved at the end of the quarter. Jenna's was already baked into the org chart. I could see it in the way she held her pen, like she'd practiced looking capable in rooms she didn't understand yet. I wasn't offended. I was calculating. They expected resistance, maybe some defensiveness, maybe tears. What they got was silence. Matt leaned in. Elaine, I know this may feel abrupt, but with the systems modernization we're implementing, we want to ensure we've got fresh eyes on the ledger side and vendor flow. Translation: your legacy code, we're deleting you after export. I smiled. Briefly. I'll make sure Jenna sees everything. And I meant it. Because there are 2 kinds of training. The kind where you teach someone what to do, and the kind where you teach them what to notice. Jenna glanced at me, unsure if she should be apologizing or thanking me. I said nothing. Her uncertainty was useful. Susan handed me a printed timeline. Week 1, shadowing. Week 2, system access. Week 3, vendor management transfer. Week 4, soft handoff and exit strategy discussion. I'd seen better offboarding templates used for decommissioning printers. When the meeting ended, they asked if I had any questions. I didn't. I walked Jenna back to the finance floor, showed her the shared drive, the locked cabinets, the quiet desk no one used but I still kept spotless. She asked if she could take notes. I told her yes, but that most of what mattered wouldn't show up in any documentation. She looked confused. That was good. At 11:03 a.m., I forwarded her the vendor compliance policy, a sample transaction map, and a spreadsheet titled, Inactives, Archive Use Only. She thanked me. She didn't realize what she was looking at. Not yet. But she would. Because this wasn't a handoff. It was a setup. And I wasn't going to stop it. When I started at Northbridge Equity Partners, the finance department had 4 desks and 1 working copier. The supply closet was also the break room. We used paper ledgers for expense reconciliation and faxed invoices that arrived curled like scrolls. That was 2001. I was 30. Newly divorced. No children. No margin for chaos. The recruiter said it would be a temporary controller role with growth potential. I never left. Over the next 2 decades, I became the muscle memory of the department. New CFOs came and went. some with vision, some with slogans. None of them stayed longer than 5 years. But the reports still ran on time, the audits still passed, and the funding cycles stayed smooth because I kept the internal rhythms aligned. Payroll, vendor flow, compliance audits. I tracked them all with the quiet attention of someone who knew that mistakes didn't shout. They whispered. And I listened. In the early years, I cleaned up messes no one knew existed. Duplicate vendors, shell contracts, phantom reimbursements. Some were accidental. Others weren't. I'd flag a transaction, get a call, and then be told, gently, that this isn't the battle we want to fight right now. So I learned, not how to ignore, how to record. I started keeping a private ledger, not for revenge, not even for protection, for clarity. Every red flag, misrouted invoice, overbilled service, round number retainer with no deliverables went into a file labeled noise. I never showed it to anyone. I just watched the patterns. They repeated, they evolved. Some players changed, some didn't, but the behavior was consistent. Corporate fraud doesn't scream. It drip feeds itself through normalized silence. I became fluent in that language. I watched how certain vendors were always emergency onboarded just before quarter end. I watched consulting firms bill $25,000 for strategy decks that never arrived. I watched department heads approve expenses just under the documentation threshold every month on the dot. And I said nothing, because whistleblowers get headlines, architects get systems. Mine was quiet, private, clean, and for years I used it only as a reference to keep things from tipping too far, to keep the machine running until Matt Carson arrived. He didn't care about control systems. He cared about presentation layers, metrics, trends. He wanted agility audits, KPI optimization, and quarterly recalibration cycles. What he didn't want were friction points like me, people who remembered too much and asked the wrong kind of questions. Within 4 months, he restructured accounts payable. Within 5, he hired a third-party compliance streamliner, someone whose LLC had the same mailing address as Matt's former classmate from Wharton. That's when the noise folder got updated again. But I still didn't act. Not yet. Because watching is one thing. Proving is another, and burning a building takes more than gasoline. You need a spark. So when they asked me to train Jenna, bright, eager, fresh, I didn't see a threat. I saw an instrument. She didn't know the game, but she could learn to read the board, and this time, I wouldn't log the red flags for myself. I'd teach her how to see them, because some systems don't need whistleblowers, they need apprentices. They started phasing me out within the first week. I wasn't surprised. My access to vendor onboarding protocols was revoked without warning. When I asked, IT replied with a boilerplate. Access changes are part of the updated hierarchy under AP modernization. Translation, we gave it to Jenna. The monthly compliance sync, the one I led for 8 years, was removed from my calendar. Jenna was now listed as the point of continuity. She didn't even know yet, but I didn't protest, because I was already building something else. Not a defense, a curriculum. Jenna showed up every morning 15 minutes early. Polite, diligent. She took notes in a neat spiral notebook. Color-coded, I noticed. She asked good questions, not great yet, but curious. I told her what they expected me to tell her, how invoice routing worked, how to check for misfiled 1099s, where the backup financials were stored, all clean, all procedural. Then on Thursday, I asked her a different question. Do you know what a same-day vendor loop looks like? She blinked. Sorry? It's when funds go out and return within 24 hours, laundered through an entity that's technically separate. Happens when someone wants money to vanish without leaving the building. Oh, she said, pen poised. Is that common? I smiled. Number, but it's fascinating. She wrote it down. That was the first breadcrumb. By the second week, I showed her how to reconcile a payment stream across 3 cost centers, then quietly pointed out a fourth that didn't exist last quarter. She asked, "Is that an error?" "No," I said. "It's a decision." We sat in silence for a moment. I could tell she felt it, something just beneath the numbers. Jenna wasn't stupid. She was new, and new people still assumed everyone followed the manual. They hadn't yet learned that in corporate finance, rules exist to be interpreted, not followed. So I gave her one extra report each day, not flagged, just quietly embedded in the daily summaries. A vendor with a P.O. box matching a known law firm's address, a series of reimbursements split across 3 VPS, all routed to the same bank, an invoice that repeated every quarter, exactly down to the minute, but never listed a contact name. She started asking sharper questions. Why does this vendor keep getting paid when there's no engagement file? I shrugged. Must be an oversight. She frowned. But the approvals, maybe someone's doing them manually. She didn't argue, but I saw her highlight the line. By week 3, I introduced her to the internal delta register, a hidden reconciliation model I built years ago to catch pattern deviations between what was reported and what was moved. She stared at it like she was seeing source code for the first time. "What is this?" she asked. "It's not part of the official suite," I said, "but it tracks the difference between procedural routing and actual fund velocity. It notices what humans forget." She was quiet. Then, "You built this?" "Yes." "Why isn't it used?" I paused. "Because it doesn't make mistakes." That afternoon, I sent her a cleaned-up version. She didn't ask. She just started using it. The next day, Jenna caught a duplicate vendor entry. 2 companies, 2 EINs, 1 tax address. She flagged it to AP. They closed the ticket as resolved intended relationship, but she didn't delete the file. She created a folder, named it Check Later. That was the moment I knew she had stopped learning how to do the job. She was learning how to see it. By the end of that week, she stopped asking for instructions and started saving evidence. I spent my final 2 weeks building a shadow system. Not code, not software, understanding. Jenna didn't realize it yet, but she already had every tool she needed. All I had to do was activate the pattern recognition. Each morning, I left her a practice file, a set of invoices to reconcile. Some were clean, others were seeded. Slight anomalies, identical timestamps, misaligned decimals, duplicate routing codes. I never said which was which. I wanted to see what she flagged. By Thursday, she'd built her own internal ledger tracker, color-coded, sorted by vendor, project, region. She didn't share it with anyone, which meant she understood. Meanwhile, I revisited the archive. The noise folder had grown over the years. Quiet entries, forgotten warnings, ignored receipts. I filtered it down to 18 entities. All of them had one thing in common: indirect ties to executives still in the building, brothers-in-law, golf partners, former board advisors, fake consulting agencies with IP addresses resolving to personal Wi-Fi routers. I didn't send this to Jenna. I embedded it. Inside the shared reconciliation workbook, under a rarely used tab labeled Q4 Historic Deltas, I created a sheet with formula-masked fields, no red flags, no warnings, just a hidden index linking payment cycles, routing banks, and vendor alias structures. If she opened it, the logic would unfold, not immediately, but inevitably. I knew she would. Because curiosity isn't taught. It's triggered. That weekend, I backed up my files to a cold drive, air-gapped, unlabeled. I encrypted the ledger audit and archived it in 3 separate locations, none of them tied to my name. This wasn't about legal insurance. It was about knowing the building would collapse, even if I wasn't there to hear it. On Monday, I sent my resignation. No drama, no speech. Just an email time-stamped 7:01 a.m. with the subject line, "Final transition completed." In the body, "All files migrated." Jenna has access to every tool I used. Her judgment is sound. My badge is with HR. No farewell lunch was offered. I didn't expect one. I left the building the way I'd entered it 22 years ago, unnoticed. But just before I closed the door, I dropped one thing on Jenna's desk, an envelope. Inside, a flash drive with a single file, deltamap.init. A post-it note with one sentence, in my handwriting, "You asked how I found inconsistencies." You already have. I never heard from her, but I didn't need to. Because Jenna wasn't just trained to do my job. She was trained to finish my sentence. 4 months passed before anything surfaced, long enough for my departure to be forgotten, long enough for Jenna to be absorbed into the company's texture. Her name started appearing on the bottom of compliance updates. Quiet, professional, unremarkable, which was perfect. Because invisibility is the best position from which to see. The first real rupture began with an email. Subject line, "Clarification on vendor number 871443, Q3 disbursement overlap?" It was sent from Jenna's account to the compliance team. Polite, technical, dismissible. Except it wasn't. Because vendor number 871443-Mossbridge Consulting- didn't exist 6 months ago. And yet it had been paid $612,000 in staggered deposits across 3 regional budgets. No signed scope of work, no deliverables, just the phrase, "Strategic Alignment Services," repeated on each invoice. The accounts payable team flagged the discrepancy. But quietly. 2 days later, Jenna asked for a payment history export for 6 additional vendors, all of them similarly phrased, similarly vague. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't report anything. She just kept asking questions. I saw it in the audit trail later, leaked in a news report. Every action time-stamped, every formula traceable. She'd used the Delta map to isolate which accounts had matching metadata, same account creation days, same routing signatures, same CFO override. And then she stopped asking. She went directly to legal. The internal investigation began under the guise of a controls refresh, but the truth came out faster than they anticipated. It started with Mossbridge, then Axis Meridian, then BridgePath Integration Group, all ghost vendors, all paid from discretionary budgets, all funneled through banking entities connected to Matt Carson's brother-in-law, a shell LLC in Delaware. The legal team froze the accounts. The SEC was notified, and then the dam broke. The CFO, Matt Carson, was placed on administrative leave. 2 regional finance VPs resigned within 24 hours. The company's external auditing firm released a statement. "Our trust was violated. We support the investigation." Jenna wasn't named, but the documents leaked anyway. Internal analyst identified inconsistencies in payment behavior pattern across Q2 to Q3. One article quoted an anonymous source. She was trained to look deeper. And apparently, she did. I watched it all from my tablet, at home, no gloating, no champagne, just the quiet unfolding of cause and consequence. By Friday, Northbridge Dynamics was trending on financial blogs as a case study in internal blind spots. Investors pulled back. The board released a statement promising a complete overhaul of compliance workflows. I opened the audit file on my drive, cross-checked the names. 10 of the 18 flagged entities were now under active review. The system had worked. Without a trigger, without a trace, just pressure applied precisely over time. Jenna didn't need to call me. She already knew I wouldn't answer. Not because I was hiding, because I had already finished the work. By the end of Q2, Northbridge Dynamics had a new CFO. The announcement came via internal memo. After a thorough review, the board is committed to restoring confidence through ethical leadership and structural transparency. Matt Carson's name wasn't mentioned. That's how you know it wasn't voluntary. The company didn't issue a public apology, but it did make changes. Vendor onboarding was rerouted through an external auditing platform. Discretionary spending caps were slashed in half. A mandatory two-signature protocol was rolled out for any vendor contract over $25,000. And quietly, without fanfare, Jenna Lee was promoted. Director of Financial Controls. No press release, just a revised org chart and a calendar invite titled Internal Compliance Refresh Kickoff, hosted by Jenna Lee. I received the screenshot secondhand. One of my former colleagues, still clinging to middle management, forwarded it with a single line. Looks like she paid attention. She did. Jenna didn't redesign the system. She didn't need to. She restored the pressure points, the friction Matt had tried to eliminate. She taught her team how to trace anomaly chains, how to read behavior through data decay, how to spot the difference between a mistake and a maneuver. She trained them the way I trained her. No speeches, just tools. One junior associate posted on LinkedIn, "Grateful to be learning from someone who teaches us to see the story behind the spreadsheet." Jenna liked the post. No comment. The board was satisfied. The firm stabilized. Investors returned. And yet, inside every new policy, every workflow, every audit log template, there were fingerprints I recognized, not copies, echoes. Jenna hadn't just taken my place. She had embedded the logic I taught her into the company's DNA. That was the difference. Executives leave their names on plaques, architects leave patterns, and mine were everywhere, not labeled, not credited, but felt. I never spoke to Jenna again, not directly, not through email, not even a courtesy note. She didn't owe me one, and I never expected it. Some legacies don't need acknowledgement, they need continuity. I followed the fallout from a distance. Local news picked up the story for a week. Another corporate embezzlement scandal, nothing too salacious. The money trail wasn't dramatic enough for headlines, but it was enough to warrant a line on the SEC's quarterly enforcement log. Enough to be cited in a Harvard case study under soft layer financial abuse in flat hierarchies. They quoted Jenna anonymously. "You don't catch fraud by looking at the crime. You catch it by noticing the silence around it." I smiled when I read that. She had listened. More importantly, she had learned. That summer I moved out of the city, a quiet town not far from water. I didn't need much, just a small cabin, a reliable internet connection, and a few books I'd been meaning to read for 15 years. I stopped checking the company's site, stopped reading financial news, let the noise die. But I kept one thing, a file on my desktop, password protected, untitled. Inside, a copy of the Delta map, a full export of the noise folder, the original vendor trace tree, names, dates, routing paths, untouched since the day I walked out. I opened it one more time. Every name that had appeared in red was now gone from the org chart. Some had resigned, others had been eased out. One took a job with a strategic partner on the West Coast. All ghosts now. I deleted the file. Not because I didn't need it, because it had already done its work. That night I took a walk by the lake. The air was still, no sounds but water moving across the rocks. I remembered something Jenna once asked me during week 2, back when she was still figuring out which questions were safe to ask. She had said, "How do you know who's clean and who's just careful?" I didn't answer her then, but now I think I would have said, "The careful ones still leave fingerprints. The clean ones never touched it." In the end, I didn't need to burn the place down. I just handed someone the match and made sure she knew where the fuse was buried.